Hey, it's Lisa Graves with Court Accountability Action here on the Midas Touch Network with Legal AF. And I am here to talk with you about one of the big decisions that came down recently from the U.S. Supreme Court. It's the case called Planned Parenthood versus Medina. And it has received some attention, but not nearly enough attention for what it's going to do to access to healthcare for millions of Americans across the country. So I'm going to tell you 3 truths and no lies about this case. Let me just start at the beginning with what happened here. This is a case that came out of South Carolina where Republicans dominate the state legislature and the governorship there. And back in 2018, they sought to bar Planned Parenthood clinics from receiving any Medicaid funds, not for abortions, but for basic healthcare services that Planned Parenthood provides to members of poor communities. And so in that case, after South Carolina made that decision to basically block the funding for Medicaid patients to get access to healthcare screenings, STD or STI checks, and more, Planned Parenthood sued. And so Planned Parenthood took that case to the federal courts under a longstanding federal civil rights law. And it ultimately went up to the U.S. Supreme Court, to the John Roberts Court. There was an argument earlier this spring, and what the court just did was rule in a 6-3 decision that South Carolina could, in fact, block Planned Parenthood from receiving funds for providing services to poor patients, even though federal law, the federal Medicaid law, protects the right of patients to choose their doctors and have any qualified doctor reimbursed for their expenses for treating patients who are on Medicaid. And so this is really a significant case violating or changing the meaning, in essence, of a longstanding statute and statutory protections for Americans to choose their own doctors. But also, it was written in a way that really limited the application of a longstanding civil rights law that has been in effect for more than 150 years, and that has provided a mechanism for people to sue the federal government if their rights are violated. So what happened here behind the scenes is we have a 6-3 court, the Roberts Court, with all Republican appointed judges ruling in favor of the state of South Carolina and against Planned Parenthood and against its patients. And there were 3 dissenting justices. Those were the justices appointed by Democratic presidents. And so this was a partisan decision. This decision also helps underscore that despite some recent publicity claiming that Amy Coney Barrett, one of Trump's appointees, is somehow going to save us, she's not. The fact is that the Republicans on that court have been voting in lockstep in almost all cases. And in this case, the bottom line is that the Roberts Court is doing the bidding of MAGA America, of MAGA Trump, of the MAGA Congress, of the MAGA legislatures in South Carolina and other places. So really what this is yet another extremely partisan decision by an extremely partisan court led by Chief Justice John Roberts. And that ruling is going to hurt millions of Americans. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, how did we get here? What's happening? This is a case that really was initiated in many ways, even though the litigation was filed by Planned Parenthood, the issue was initiated by right-wing anti-choice groups. They are going after Planned Parenthood for funding that has nothing to do with abortion. For many years, in fact, decades, federal law has prohibited Medicaid funding of abortions. This is not about abortions, but it's about these right-wingers, these anti-choice, anti-abortion activists and operatives trying to bar and hurt Planned Parenthood, trying to defund it. That's really what's happening. And you can see that in the amicus briefs. Amicus briefs meaning the so-called friend of court briefs that were submitted to the court to basically urge it to rule this way. Those briefs came in from an array of right-wing groups that have been part of this extreme anti-choice, also anti-abortion, anti-gay agenda. Those groups include one of the groups that is part of the James Dobson Network, one of these, family coalition, so-called family groups. It also included briefs from Jay Sekulow, who not only was a Trump lawyer, advising around his impeachments, but also helped create the Judicial Crisis Network, which was then known as the Judicial Confirmation Network back in 2004, 2005, when it was created, JCN is the group that has been central to Leonard Leo's efforts to pack the Supreme Court with anti-abortion operatives. And we know that JCN spent millions working to get confirmed the Trump appointees who were handpicked by Leonard Leo. That's Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh. This decision was written by Neil Gorsuch, and it reflects, even though it doesn't talk about abortion, it's not about abortion, the decision. The underlying issue is about abortion. Other briefs came in from a number of anti-choice, anti-abortion legislators in the House of Representatives and some senators, including Mike Lee and Ted Cruz, two particularly regressive U.S. senators. By the way, almost every single person who signed on to that brief is someone whose elections were supported by Charles Koch's PAC and Charles Koch's political operation, its grassroots arm. Even though Charles Koch, sometimes gets favorable coverage in the news for being a libertarian who's supposedly pro-choice, and yet almost every single politician he's backed to put into power is anti-choice, anti-abortion. So follow the money, not his words. Don't listen to what his lips are saying. Look at where his money is going. His money has gone in to support almost everyone. His money through his operations has gone in to support almost every one of the people who signed on to this brief, assailing Planned Parenthood and Planned Parenthood's access to reimbursement, just like any other healthcare provider. So first of all, you have this Supreme Court that is very partisan, hyper-partisan, anti-choice, advancing this MAGA agenda. Second of all, you have this amicus brief situation happening where you have so many parts of the right-wing apparatus that has supported the packing of the Supreme Court weighing in to try to deny Planned Parenthood access to reimbursement for healthcare screenings. And along with that, you also have what's happening in Congress, which is the what I call the big billionaire bailout bill, the bill that would extend the outlandish tax cuts for billionaires, this BBB measure that's now pending in the Senate. It also is part of this effort at the federal level to defund Planned Parenthood, to try to strip it of access to funds for Medicaid recipients that go to those clinics. So this is MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. That's the second truth. The third truth is this decision by the Supreme Court is going to hurt millions of Americans. In this case, what it does is overturn the decision by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. And immediately, just last night, today is Friday when I'm recording this, but just last night, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals basically took a poll to decide whether it was going to take up this case, a case in its jurisdiction, meaning Texas and Louisiana, for example, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, to basically allow this rule to go into effect in those states. And so as this decision, percolates out in terms of its effects, what we're going to see is the states that are covered by the Fourth Circuit, that includes Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. That's the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, West Virginia. I think it includes West Virginia, but definitely includes South Carolina. So that South Carolina legislative decision, that ruling by anti-choice legislators to punish Planned Parenthood by denying it access to reimbursement for treating people on Medicaid for preventative care, that's going to go into effect. And it will go into effect in the Fifth Circuit, presumably in any state that has passed similar measures. All the while, at the national level, MAGA Republicans, at the behest of the Trump administration, are trying to defund Planned Parenthood across the board in any state, no matter whether that state allows abortion or not. And again, this issue does not involve reimbursement for abortions, which has been barred by the Hyde Amendment for decades now. So the third truth is, as I said, how this is going to hurt so many Americans. When you look at Planned Parenthood, Planned Parenthood's operations, its clinics in states, these are healthcare clinics where 75%, actually more than 75% of those clinics are located in rural areas or underserved areas. And so you have places where there aren't that many healthcare providers, where people have a hard time getting access to doctors, to medicine. And in this instance, these Planned Parenthood clinics are providing access for preventative care. That's like pap smears and breast cancer examinations. It provides testing for STDs or sexually transmitted infections and treatment for them, provides access to contraceptives. Many Americans get their contraception through those Planned Parenthood clinics. That's the pill, IUD implantation, and other services. And those sort of services are what Medicaid covers. It covers those services no matter who the doctor is, unless the doctor and the clinic is Planned Parenthood in accordance with this Supreme Court decision. What's this going to mean? It's going to mean that millions of Americans are not going to be able to choose the doctors that they want to see, choose the clinic that's maybe nearest to them or most convenient to them to get routine healthcare screening. As Ketanji Brown Jackson and Justice Sotomayor and Justice Kagan pointed out in their dissent, this, really strikes at the heart of a fundamental right of ordinary people to be able to choose the doctors they want to see when they're most vulnerable. When they are getting a screening for a pap smear, doctors that they trust, people that they trust to provide them care, provide them advice. And so this effort is deeply pernicious, and that is no lie. And so with that, I'm going to conclude this wrap of the Planned Parenthood versus Medina case, or now Medina versus Planned Parenthood case as it's named before the U.S. Supreme Court. I'll just conclude to make it one more note, which is there is this concurring opinion by Justice Clarence Thomas, who is in fact the most corrupt justice who has ever served on the U.S. Supreme Court, someone who should not be sitting on any cases. But in this case, he basically used his concurrence in this 6-3 decision to attack this fundamental civil rights law, the Civil Rights Act of 1871, which is in the statutes at USC Section 1983. And he basically suggested that the whole line of cases, a century of cases, be reconsidered based on his cramped and narrow view of those civil rights laws that are designed to protect all of us. This is not unusual for Clarence Thomas. At one point, Clarence Thomas tried to justify someone being chained to a hitching post in the heat of Alabama's sun as punishment. And he claimed that couldn't violate the Eighth Amendment as cruel because it wasn't cruel and unusual. It could be cruel or unusual, but in his view, it wasn't cruel and unusual under the Eighth Amendment, so it didn't count. He's someone who decision after decision after decision writes deeply restrictive opinions, trying to rewrite the laws, restrict other people's rights, obviously also on abortion. And in that Dobbs decision from 3 years ago, it was Justice Thomas's concurrence that said that the court should reconsider its rulings on access to contraception, that's Griswold versus Connecticut, as well as on, other civil rights that have been protected, like gay rights. And so you have one of the most regressive justices to sit on the court in this century, weighing in favor of this decision, along with the other Republican appointees. And this decision, like so many decisions of the Roberts Court, basically shows how it's towing the MAGA line, how it's advancing Trump's agenda, how it is undermining our rights. And that's why also I'm so glad that my book about John Roberts and the Supreme Court Without Precedent is coming out soon, because we need more and more people to understand the damage that this U.S. Supreme Court is doing to America, to our rights, to our freedoms, to our health, and to our future. So with that, I'll sign off. This is Lisa Graves from Court Accountability Action with the Midas Touch Network and Legal AF. Please subscribe, please share, please don't give up.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.